Laurie Turnbull. She is a professor of political science at Dalhousie University. Laurie, thank you for taking the time in these extraordinary times, fast-moving every day. So just first of all, I want to get into the phone call, but let's talk about the news, about how it does appear as though there will be an exemption for the auto sector. Exactly what that means, but there was a phone call between Donald Trump and the heads of the big three automakers, Stellantis, GM, and Ford, asking for an exemption, asking for just a break from all of this, just because of these parts moving back and forth so many times and how it would just bring to a halt North American auto production. So what's your reaction to that?
Right. I mean, I think up until yesterday, it wasn't clear that Trump was going to go through with this at all, because the last time we were on our way to tariffs and we all geared up, and at the 11th hour, he said there was going to be a 30-day pause. And so I think nobody really quite knew what was going to be the case until it was the case. But now that it's the case, I think, yes, there are going to be people who, in the auto industry who are going to say, this is not possible. You can't actually bring in these measures, which is going to bring the integrated supply chain to a halt, and expect the sector to respond to it immediately and have the capacity to start doing this stuff on the American side alone. And so I think that's probably why we see a pretty immediate change in that particular sector, because of how closely Canada and the US are integrated there, and just the impossibility of trying to change things overnight.
And so, Laurie, let's talk a little bit about the phone call and what, at least maybe we can show it again, about what Donald Trump posted following that phone call, but basically saying we had this phone call, it ended somewhat friendly, but he talked again about fentanyl. Oh, here it is again. Okay, so, I told him that many people have died of fentanyl coming in from Canada and Mexico. Nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. Trudeau says it's gotten better, but that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which makes me curious, like, what's going on here? I then realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin. Your reaction to what Donald Trump posted?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, probably goes without saying, no, Justin Trudeau is not trying to use this to stay in power. Justin Trudeau knows full well that his time as Prime Minister has come to an end, and that he is he's filling this role to the very last minute, because of the curious circumstances that we find ourselves in. Typically, an outgoing Prime Minister probably wouldn't have to be front and center as much as Justin Trudeau is right now, but he has no choice. This is the circumstance we're in. Trump wants to continue to make this argument about this being about the flow of fentanyl. And that is absolutely an unfounded argument, as we have pointed out a million times from our side. There's just there's no substance to that. There's no truth to that. I think he's got all kinds of reasons for doing what he's doing, and I think it's largely to create a power imbalance, to create supply for himself as the narcissist that he is. And he wants people to respond to him. He wants people to be in disruption and panic because of him. And he wants to be the one to be able to create that effect on everybody. And so now that he's got the tariffs in place, he's the one that's able to say, well, you've got to do this or it's not good enough. And if the tariffs come off, it'll be because he decides, not because there was a negotiation between the two countries that was fair and reasonable and rational. It's because he's going to decide if and when this is going to come to an end.
What do you make of, we're hearing kind of, it's interesting to hear the difference in terms of what how the Prime Minister has characterized this. Prime Minister characterized this yesterday in that press conference as basically Donald Trump's ambition is to make this the 51st state, to try and totally collapse the Canadian economy. Then we heard a very different reaction from the Bloc Québécois leader, who said that's nonsense. That's never going to happen. We should stop talking about that. What do you make of kind of of that political discourse that's happening?
I think that ultimately both of them, two things can be true. Mm-hmm. And I think both Trudeau and Blanchet are right. I think that Trudeau is absolutely right, that this is an ambition that Donald Trump has. I think that he has expansionist ambitions, not just about Canada. I think he looks at what Canada has in terms of our water, critical minerals, and he thinks, why am I, quote unquote, subsidizing this country when they have all of that? Why wouldn't that be ours? And so if we just annex, well, then it will be. And so I don't think that's out of Trump's calculations at all. I also agree with Blanchet that it's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to think about it as part of his calculation. It's not that we have to be putting that on the table as something to negotiate and talk about, obviously not. But it's something I think when we're thinking about what motivates this person, which is a big part of any kind of political negotiation, and I get that this is not a negotiation, but anytime that you're trying to figure out the other side, we have to figure out what's motivating this person. And I don't think that it's a bad thing for us to be saying his motivations are actually not sensible and not something that we would ever entertain.
I just want to ask you one last question, Laurie, and this is coming from the CBC's Katie Simpson, who was told just moments ago, because we were trying to figure out what this auto sector exemption means. So this is what she says. A White House official speaking on background tells Katie Simpson, the automaker exemption applies to everyone in compliance with USMCA. What do you make of that? It sounds as though that it's all the automakers, or it's the big three automakers. Does it mean that it's Canadian parts that go into making a car that moves across that's partially or mostly assembled in the United States? Is that how you would read that?
Who knows? I guess we will have to figure that out.
Yeah.
I suspect
Sorry to put you on the
that's
spot, just trying to figure it out myself.
Well, no, it's just we'll have to push to see what that means down the road, right? I mean, it seems like that what we're doing on day 2 of this is trying to figure out, like, what can we do to try to walk this back, figure this out. And, as Minister LeBlanc is saying, we're going to keep our counter tariffs in place until this whole thing is resolved, because otherwise we've got nothing to negotiate from. But if he's going to start making carve-outs and making changes and things like that, I think at this point we're not sure exactly what that means.
Laurie, thank you. That is Laurie Turnbull joining us live from Ottawa. Always good to see you. Many people and businesses have a lot of questions amid this trade war between the United States and Canada. Viewers are writing to us from across the country, and we appreciate all of the questions and all of the feedback that you're bringing to us. To answer some of your questions, we bring in the CBC's Mark Carcassol. So, Mark, what are we hearing from our viewers, from our audience?
Well, after yesterday's news, obviously a glut of more emails coming through to ask at CBC.ca, Andrew, and a lot of them have to do with the tariffs, Canada's response to them, our relationship with the U.S. going forward, and even certain little aspects of our response to tariffs. Why are we doing this instead of that, and so on and so forth. Case in point, an email we got from Michel Lesson, who asks, wouldn't Canadian retaliatory tariffs on American products have the same punishing effect on Canadians? Emotions aside, wouldn't it be better to have no tariffs and have market demand make Canadian products come out cheaper automatically, or have American products be supplanted by products from other countries? Basically, what Michelle is asking is, are we looking at this perhaps and responding to it too emotionally? So to get a response on that, I turn to Fraser Johnson. He's a professor at the Ivey Business School, who says that the government is doing things surgically here in terms of their response, and he applauds them for that.
So if you take a look at the first round, for example, they're looking at products like alcohol, coffee, clothing, shoes, furniture, and appliances. These are all categories where, as Canadians, we can look for alternative sources of supply outside the U.S. So I'll give you an example. Rather than drinking California Chardonnay, you can buy Canadian wine or Australian wine or wine from different parts of the world. But similar with electronics and appliances. So I think we can applaud the Canadian government in the way that they're approaching this in terms of being measured.
So there's multiple ways to take that, he says. They're leaving room for a ramp up if need be, and we know that the Prime Minister has threatened that the higher the tariffs from the U.S., the more measures will come from Canada the other way around. But essentially the government is keeping away, according to Mr. Johnson, to stay maneuverable, to change with the times, whatever comes their way. That's why they're doing things the way they are now.
Mark, thank you. The CBC's Mark Carcassol.